Right now, very disturbing testimony about what may have happened to Crystal Rogers after she was killed 10 years ago in Bardstown, Kentucky. It's another stunning revelation on the stand as the trial in Bowling Green has entered its second week. Hello, everybody. I'm Doug Proffitt, WHAS 11 News, and thank you for joining us as we break down over the next 30 minutes this important Monday in this case. Today, accomplice Joseph Lawson became a major figure after a witness testified disturbing hearsay about what possibly happened to Crystal after she died. We want to go directly now to Bowling Green, where our Shay McAllister continues her coverage of this case. She's outside the courtroom. And Shay, a man named Charlie Girdley takes the stand. He says Joseph Lawson told him he would, quote, pull Rogers' teeth and let the hogs do the rest. This is certainly so horrible to hear. I can only imagine. What was the reaction in that courtroom today?
Just as you might expect, that was so challenging for everybody and Crystal Rogers' friends and family to hear. Lots of tissue boxes coming out there, a lot of people getting up and leaving the room. Those are the kind of details the family has told us they knew they were going to hear. They tried to be ready to hear, but to hear that about your mom, your daughter, your niece, your sister, you don't know how you're going to feel until you do. And I can tell you it was really challenging for them. So if Charlie Girdley sounds familiar, that's because he is. He testified in the Steve Lawson trial just about a month ago, and a lot of what he said today was similar to what he said in the Steve Lawson trial. He made a comment about how Joseph Lawson said he would bury Crystal with a skid steer and no one would ever find her. He said that Steve Lawson told him that Brooks was looking for someone to get rid of his old lady, and that Steve Lawson had told Brooks that Charlie was the man for the job. Charlie said he didn't take it anywhere from there. Here was the new details that we just heard today. A couple of weeks after Crystal went missing, Charlie said that Brooks asked him to come over to the Houck family farm on Pascal Ballard Lane and pour new concrete in one of the barns there. He also said while he was there doing the concrete job that he saw Rosemary, and Rosemary was with them as they were working. At that time, Rosemary said something along the lines of, "We would have been better off if she was gone a long time ago." He said that he continued to work for Brooks Houck on and off for the next year, and that was about it. A big part of his testimony today was regarding this exchange of car keys between Joseph Lawson and Brooks Houck. And the way he told it on the stand today was that he was with Joey. They went and met Brooks somewhere. Charlie got his pay from Brooks for the week. Joseph Lawson took Crystal's keys from Brooks and told Charlie the reason that he had those keys is because he was going to be doing some general work on her car, fixing the brakes and such. That was the final version of the story today, but as we soon learned as cross-examination got underway, there was 5 other versions before they landed on that one. One major difference between the Steve Lawson trial, Charlie Girdley, and the Brooks Houck trial, Charlie Girdley, was the cross-examination. He was given a hard time in the Steve Lawson trial, don't get me wrong. They attempted to poke some holes in his story, suggesting he was a heavy drug user, that he might not have the best memory, that maybe he was trying to get something out of this, but what he experienced that time around was nothing compared to what he experienced this time around. And there were some very specific examples that I think sat with the jury that the defense used to poke holes in his case. The first was that story about the car keys. And they actually pulled the transcripts from police interviews saying, well, the first 2 times you talked to police, you said nothing about the car keys. The third time you told them this version. The 4th time you told them this version. The 5th time it was this version. And then after lots of persuading from police, you finally landed on the 6th version. Of course, creating a lot of doubt in the juror's mind that, okay, did that really happen? Did he hear it right? Did he remember it right? Hard to tell. Another thing that they were poking holes in was a certain phone call with Joseph Lawson. He said that Joey had called him from the Bluegrass Parkway asking him to help move Crystal's car. He said he needed somebody with a truck and a trailer. Charlie said that he answered the call but told Joey he couldn't help because he was drinking and he didn't want to drink and drive. Well, they pulled the phone records. The defense did. That call never happened according to the phone records. I'm going to bring in my colleague now, Alexandra Goldberg, who came into this cross-examination about midway. I was sitting in there all morning, so this was lost on me, but you said when you walked in, you noticed a certain mood in the room.
Shay, it was absolutely tense. You could tell that the defense was really coming after Girdley, and in two sort of angles, as you mentioned. One, the unreliability factor. You said that, you know, he sort of landed on this 6-story, the defense trying to paint this picture of Girdley being unreliable to the jury. But when Joseph Lawson's attorney, Robert Boyd, came for cross-examination, which, by the way, was probably some of the longest speaking that he's done so far during this trial. But when he came to cross-examine Charlie Girdley, he came after this sort of potential bribery scheme that he alleged was happening with the Kentucky State Police. So to back up here, Charlie Girdley was in violation of a probation order, and he had a 2-year sentence, quote, hanging over his head. He was picked up by a special task force, and Robert Boyd alleges that the cops took him to Long John Silver's, bought him dinner. He bought his own dinner, but still in the back of a cop car, went to a restaurant, and he actually was only sentenced to 90 days with work release. Robert Boyd asked, "Did you feel like you got a pretty good deal there?" Charlie Girdley said, "I guess." He also pulls up an interrogation tape from June 21st, where you can hear Charlie Girdley saying, quote, "Probably wouldn't have gotten this sanction without you guys. You helped me significantly." Of course, this is in relation to that 2-year sentence going down to 90 days in work release.
So after all of that, Shane Young gets a chance to come back up. They call it redirect. And Shane Young does say, you know, let's talk a little bit more about that whole promise from police and your final sentence. And Charlie said, yeah, I want to say, you know, the prosecutor on that case told me he felt for me. He had a heart for me because Charlie had relapsed right when his wife died. And so Charlie was making it seem like that special deal wasn't because of the story we wrote here. That special deal came because I went through something really hard and they wanted to give me a second chance. And that was at least the final story that we got to hear, because Shane Young, prosecutor, gets the final word.
Exactly. And the last thing that Shane Young said is, "What is the truth?" Charlie Girdley said, "I told the truth today."
So a lot to consider. Doug, Nick, I'm excited to get your take on this, because to me it seems like the jury heard two really compelling things and it might end up being a wash.
That's a good point. That's a good way of looking at it. Shay, and WHAS 11 News legal analyst, attorney Nick Mudd of the Mudd Law Group is joining me here now. He's also a former prosecutor. So let's go right back to Charlie Girdley. Certainly what he said on the stand today is something the town of Bardstown has speculated to the detail about for 10 years. But does he hold much credibility with what he was able to report, allegedly, that Joseph Lawson said?
Well, let's talk about both sides of it, Doug. First, if it were true, it's upsetting, it's disturbing, it's sickening, and certainly it's something that's going to stick in the jury's mind regardless. And it gives an explanation of why Crystal's body was never found. My question was, did the Houck farm have pigs on it? Were there hogs on that farm, or did the Lawsons own pigs? You know, that question was not asked, in my understanding. That kind of left out there in my mind. That would have been the follow-up if I was there. Now, that being said... So you would have asked just the obvious. You're talking about hogs. Are they even on that farm? Absolutely. Why would you not? I mean, you would want to know that going into it as the prosecutor or the defense. I mean, you hear that, you're going to ask your client that, certainly. And you don't ask it if you did have hogs. Obviously, you don't want to bring that out if you're Brooks Houck's attorney. But, you know, I think that's a question that should have been asked by one side or the other. Whoever it would have benefited needed to ask that question. I don't know the answer, but I'm wondering if it was inherent that everybody there knew it, because Bardstown's really talked about that theory for the entire time of this case. But this jury doesn't know that. This jury's not from Bardstown. They don't know the farm. They don't know the area. They're not supposed to. They're only listening to what is being presented in that courtroom. Now, let's talk about the flip side, Doug. This guy has no credibility. He's told 6 different stories. Steve Shoring ripped him apart, and then Robert Boyd got up there and put up all 6 stories and showed he was a complete and utter liar. And now, here 10 years later, he's telling a 6th story. And certainly this special deal, you know, Shay was talking about how he mentioned on the stand he got a second chance. He didn't get a second chance. The reason he got that chance, I'm telling you, is because he was willing to talk on this case.
So they have poked holes in Charlie Girdley's credibility, even going to say he was a heavy drug user.
I wouldn't say poke holes. I would say they destroyed his testimony. I just don't see how, you know, and it's frustrating, I know, for the prosecution, because it's kind of it's jaw-dropping testimony. But by the end of that cross-examination from both the defense lawyers, certainly he just kept telling the story. He was changing his story on the stand. So
we have the Lawsons, whose credibility has always been shot, especially Steve Lawson, who is now sitting in prison. Now you say that the Charlie Girdley testimony, you can't trust a thing this man said, yet you believe it could be effective or have left an impression.
If the jury sees through it and they believe him and they say, no, we do believe you, both of those defendants are in big trouble.
Now, there was some late-breaking testimony that came out just before the court ended today about a hair that was discovered in the station wagon of Anna Whitesides. Now, folks, we haven't heard that name in a while, but Anna Whitesides is the grandmother of Brooks Houck. That caught your attention immediately.
It did, and you know, first thing there was a white car, the night of July 3rd, July 4th, a white Buick. Two hunters saw a Buick parked in the back of the Houck farm. Move along several months later, you know, tips come out, and Tommy Ballard had posted on Facebook about looking for this white car, and a couple days later, oh, there comes and finds that Brooks Houck's grandmother owned the white car and is selling it, and Nick Houck is selling it with her at a dealership. Now, the big thing about it, though, was a hair was found in the back of the trunk of the white Buick, and that's the same white Buick people saw on the back of the Houck farm the night of July the 3rd. First thing I asked myself, I think the first thing you asked me is, what DNA testing did they do? Well, they tried to do DNA testing on it. The problem was they couldn't get a profile, which means the sample wasn't large enough. They weren't able to extract DNA from the hair. What they did do, though, is they looked at it under microscopic examination and showed that it was not Anna Whiteside's hair, and they compared it to a hair from Crystal Rogers and said it was very similar.
But also the big question I would have if I was sitting on the jury is, can you tell me when does that hair date back to that station wagon, that car? I mean, what if say Crystal Rogers was helping Anna Whitesides one time with putting groceries in the car years ago, and it was in the back? You know, there's all kinds of holes in that.
Certainly, but that white car was sitting back there on the night of July the 3rd, and Doug, how many hairs do you have in the back of your car? I mean, it's just an odd thing to be in the trunk of a car. Again, it's not a smoking gun, but I do think it adds some credence to the prosecution's theory, and certainly it, again, pulls in Nick Houck, right? The name we've heard over and over and over again in this trial.
We're going to talk more about that in just a second, but first, you know, one thing that has certainly come up often during this trial, you've heard it even today, is the use of a skid steer. Many of you have been asking us about that piece of equipment. You want to know what it is, what it looks like. Well, we did some research on it for you. These are photographs of various skid steers doing construction work across several work sites. A skid steer is a small, compact, but versatile, heavy equipment vehicle. It has lift arms that can be attached to a wide variety of buckets and other attachments. They're typically used for moving large amounts of dirt or debris or loading large items. We want to move back to Shay McAllister in Bowling Green. Shay, we heard a lot about that white Buick today. Nick was just talking about it. Something new that it was actually a post from Tommy Ballard that led police to this car?
Yeah, that stood out to me too, Doug, because anyone who's known about this case since 2015 knows that Tommy Ballard was the fiercest fighter for justice. He was tracking down every witness, every tip, any call that came to him. He personally was investigating it, as well as turning it over to police. And what we learned here is that there was a couple of guys doing a coon hunting competition on a property right near the Houck family farm on the night of July 3rd. And on that night, they happened to notice a white Buick parked on a road behind the farm. They thought it was unusual, and once they heard that Crystal was missing, they went to the Ballard family and told them about it in person. So Tommy Ballard, a little bit of an investigator himself unofficially, posts on Facebook a picture of a white Buick and says, does anybody know anything about a white Buick? Who might drive one? Where it might have been? He's just looking for anything. And just a couple of days later, the Nelson County Sheriff's Office is getting a search warrant to search Anna Whiteside's house. And they are looking specifically for that white Buick. We found out today They take the search warrant to the house 2 days after Tommy Ballard's post on Facebook. They look into her garage. Anna Whiteside's, of course, is Nick and Brooke's grandma. When they look in her garage, they don't see the white Buick. They see a new car with temp tags. And that raises red flags for them because in 2016, the Kentucky law was that you could only have a temp tag for 30 days, which means they just got this car 30 days ago. And as they start digging into this a little bit further, they're asking, well, where did you get this car? When did you get this car? And they're not getting many answers from Anna Whiteside herself, but they went ahead and got the search warrants and followed the evidence. They found out that they had gotten that new car at a dealership on Dixie Highway, and it was purchased on May the 2nd. Now, you'll remember Tommy Ballard's post, April 28th. So 4 days after Tommy Ballard posts on Facebook, does anyone know about a white Buick? They are getting rid of Anna Whiteside's white Buick. And when I say they, I mean Nick Houck. There was surveillance video at the dealership showing that Nick Houck was leading the show for the sale. He was the one talking to the salesperson, and Anna was there. Her name is on everything. She signs everything, but she's just following behind him in this surveillance video. Of course, once they get that they find out that the white Buick is there, they immediately have it towed to LMPD's forensic lab where it's processed. During that processing, they find that hair in the trunk, which was just discussed. They ruled that the hair was similar in color and characteristic to Crystal Rogers' hair, and that was based off of hair from Crystal Rogers' hairbrush. They also looked at Anna Whiteside's hair and excluded it, saying no similarities there. I will say this particular testimony, another really difficult moment for the Ballard family. All of her daughters were doubled over with their hands covering their faces, sobbing at this point. Multiple family members left the room. That was really tough to hear, and as you can imagine it would be, hearing that your mom may have been in the trunk of a car. That was really, really difficult. We know after they found that hair, they brought in a cadaver dog. The cadaver dog was brought to that lot where the car was held, but they did not tell us the results of it. They did not tell us the results of that. All we know is that it was ultimately Nick Houck who was really behind that deal, facilitating that deal, and that was a really big moment in this case. Doug, what stood out to me was you think about Tommy Ballard and all of his work, and in a lot of ways, we don't really know, did his work turn up anything? This seems like hard evidence proof that something he did, that Facebook post, might have been the linchpin for this whole trail with the white car.
So much, and of course, Tommy Ballard, Crystal's father, also one of the unsolved murder mysteries still lingering out there in Bardstown. Nick Mudd joining me here now. Nick, let's talk about picking up on that important testimony that was here today. It seems like we're now going into week 2. We're now launching into the details that everybody has been wondering about. Some of the things we've been hearing about over the years. This is the first. Anna Whiteside's, I remember her name a long time ago, now coming back into this. But it's still circumstantial.
It is. And, you know, as we've talked about, Doug, there's no smoking gun here. But again, another oddity. Why is there a hair that's similar in characteristics to Crystal Rogers found in the trunk of the white car, the same white car that witnesses described were on the back of the Houck farm on July 3rd, the year Crystal went disappearing? I mean, again, it's not this is the end-all be-all evidence, but I think it's another piece in the puzzle. And again, whose name do we hear? Not Brooks Houck. We hear Nick Houck's name again and again and again, which the prosecution told us at the beginning. They were out in the open saying, look, in our opinion, they're co-conspirators, Rosemary Houck and Nick Houck. They're not on trial here, but you're going to hear about them. And so, you know, we're hearing more and more about that, though. But one does have to wonder, they've got to still tie that back to Brooks Houck here.
A couple of things I want to ask you about. First of all, just to set the scene for you in that courtroom, the family wearing pink, large numbers of other people wearing pink in that courtroom. Of course, that's the color of Team Crystal Rogers. That was that massive search effort led by now the late Tommy Ballard, starting 10 years ago. We are now in a holiday week. Do you think this jury could come to a conclusion by the 3rd of July, or does the judge still take this to the 8th of July as he's expected to?
I think we'll probably end up going into next week. I mean, we've got 3 days left this week. Prosecution's still rolling. I think they still have a lot more witnesses coming. And my understanding is the defense has a defense. So, you know, I'm expecting, we don't know what to expect. I'm still predicting Houck doesn't testify, Lawson doesn't testify, but I think both sides will have a defense and will present some evidence.
So you think the defense attorneys, Brian Butler, Steve Schroering, are just sort of sitting back right now, waiting to pounce?
I wouldn't say waiting. I would just, you know, they're attacking, certainly. They're attacking on cross-examination. But I think in a case like this, you know, you can't just sit back and say, well, I hope there wasn't enough evidence. You got to fight for your client, and I anticipate that's what they're going to do here. We're
going to talk about with Shay, Nick Houck and his ex-girlfriend in just a second. First, one other thing I want to go over with you, because I know you've been interested in different other things that have come out. This came out earlier today with the IRS agents were actually on the stand, and they were a man named Charlie Birch and Chad Warner, 2 IRS special agents. On August 6, 2020, Birch said agents executed a search warrant on the Houck family farm and found a pair of pants with 2 digital voice recorders hidden in a bedroom closet. They also searched a dresser in the master bedroom and found a bag labeled, quote, stamp bag, end quote, with bingo stamps and a tape recorder inside. Then the jurors asked the investigators, again, the jurors today, whose home they had searched, and Chad Warner said it was Rosemary Houck's home. What do you make of that? Remember, she was long accused of recording secret grand jury testimony.
Right. Now we have recorders there in pen. I mean, again, it's one of those things where I think the jury thinks, that seems a little suspicious, you know. It's not a smoking gun, but, you know, sometimes with these circumstantial cases, Doug, I saw a prosecutor do this once in closing argument. It was a scale, and the scale was tipped one way, and this was not guilty. And what he did is says, we did this, and we did that, and we did that, and we did that, and we did that. And by the end of it, the scale went the other way. And that's how you build a circumstantial case, and that's what the prosecutor is doing. They are presenting every single piece that they have to connect the Houck family to this murder.
What about jurors asking questions? How common is that? I mean, does that happen often in courtrooms?
I would not say, it's really up to the judge. I've had some judges say absolutely not, they don't allow it. Other judges allow it in every one of their trials, and that's their practice. For me, as an attorney, I love it. I think it's great. Number one, even as a former prosecutor, it happened, as a defense lawyer, it's happened. It gives you an idea into the jury's mind of what they're thinking, what they're focused on, and what they're listening to. I've had some that have come from left field, and the prosecutor and I, or the defense lawyer and I look at each other and like, well, we didn't even think of that, you know. So it's not a common practice, but it does happen a lot, and I'm for it. I think it's great.
Let's now move to Amber Bowman, Nick Houck's ex-girlfriend. Again, Nick Houck, the brother of Brooks Houck being the chief murder suspect in this case. Nick Houck, an unindicted co-conspirator. So they brought her on the stand today. It was fascinating what she said. She was all talking about the 3rd of July, once again, that key date where most people believe in this case that's possibly the date that Crystal Rogers was killed. It was a rainy day, and she said she and Nick had been dating for about 7 years. They lived down the road from Brooks Houck and Crystal Rogers, and they were going to move. They were supposed to be moving out of their house, Nick and Amber. And Nick's promised that he was going to help at a rental property, and thought, and she couldn't. She called and called him again. Woke up the next morning, July 4th, no answer. You woke up that morning and Nick wasn't there. Is that normal behavior? Special Prosecutor Shane Young asked. No, he had never not come home before. Bowman said she tried calling Nick Houck at least 15 different times. And between the morning of July 3rd through the night of July 4th, every call went unanswered to voicemail. Why is that testimony so important today?
Well, you know, again, today felt like Nick Houck was on trial. I mean, we've heard so much about him. Really, today was we heard the prosecutor say in opening last week, hey, Houck, Rosemary, unindicted co-conspirators. Today was really the day where they presented that evidence. And, you know, this was a young lady, had flawless credibility. There wasn't too much to ask her on cross-examination. They did some damage. I know Butler asked her some questions, but it did the best with what he had. But, you know, what they're showing here is that we've heard about the car, but Nick Houck gets 15 calls and goes basically missing from July 3rd to July 4th. She calls him 15 times, no answer. He says he was working on their new home, but remember, later in the testimony, she was asked, well, when you went over there, did you notice any work done? And she said no. And, you know, that's just odd. We've talked about cell phones and how you and I, you know, we go 24 hours without our phone. We're losing our mind. I'd have family calling, friends calling, people freaking out, employees calling.
Neighbors would be tracking you down.
Everybody. I mean, you know, it'd be, and just to go silent for that, the most important date of this family's.
Another key moment. The jury asked Amber Bowman if Nick ever gave an explanation as to why he left his phone at the new home. No, he didn't really give a reason, she said.
None.
The jury asked that question.
Yeah.
So Brian Butler in his cross-examination did say, you know, Nick was a hired and currently active police officer on the Bardstown Police Department there. He had not been let go yet by the chief, Rick McCubbin. And they said, well, was it normal for him to be gone late at night? And Bowman said, yes, that's true, that it was. It was normal for him to be gone. So once again, as we start week number 2, we keep hearing a lot of names, but we're not hearing about Brooks Houck much. We're hearing about Nick Houck, Rosemary Houck, their mother, the boy's mother there, both unindicted co-conspirators. When is this case going to really zero in on the movements of Brooks Houck? Where is he in this whole picture yet?
Well, we had the phone records. We've kind of got the idea set out there that, like, look, the last person with Crystal to see her alive was Brooks Houck. I mean, that's essentially, that's almost been conceded. That night, 7:30, the romantic evening, etc. And so that's kind of their basis. What they're doing is they're throwing this wide net. And what I expect the prosecutor to do is, in closing argument, to tie all of that together and say, this is the whole picture now. Let me paint it for you. That's how you win a circumstantial case.
Okay, and you do that by naming all these other people, and even including hearsay.
You do. I mean, yeah, there's some unreliable things out there. Now, the defense is going to do the opposite and say, look, all we've talked about is left field. Brian Butler, Steve Shoring, Kevin Coleman, Robert Boyd, they're going to get up in closing and say, where's the beef? You know, all we've talked about is all these other people. Rosemary Houck's not sitting here. Nick Houck's not sitting here. Where are they? You know, that's what the prosecutor wants to talk about, not our clients.
Do they bring up, let's go back to the first trial. This is a different jury, of course, hearing this trial, of Steve Lawson. Do they bring up his unreliability and they bring up the fact that, you know, Steve Lawson testifying came out a surprise to all of us. You didn't think he was going to do it, and all of a sudden we find out he did, and you reported that that was probably a disaster.
It was a Hail Mary at that point in time. The case wasn't going well for them, and so he had to testify. I told you I thought he was going to, and he did. I still don't think either one of these individuals will testify. But, you know, Steve Lawson has a Fifth Amendment right not to testify, so they can't call him as a witness in this case. He is still pending sentencing in his case as well. So if the prosecutor wanted to cut a deal with him, they could have. That hasn't happened. I thought it would happen. Didn't happen. But, you know, and certainly maybe he would want to testify for his son. I don't know, but I don't know it would help at this point, given how many stories he told.
So your analysis, that's why you're here and so good at what you do. Early on in the Steve Lawson trial, I remember you were really sort of on the fence of whether he would testify. And then as it moved along, you said,
right.
I think he's going to be on the stand. They're going to put him on the stand. Do you see something like that happening with Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson?
I don't. Brooks Houck gave a statement, and he's really kind of stuck by that day one statement. Because remember, is your memory more reliable now, or was it more reliable 10 years ago? And so he's really kind of stuck in that statement. And Joey Lawson, we still haven't heard that much. We heard this, you know, the story of the teeth in the pig or the hogs today, but that guy had no credibility. So we still haven't really heard Joey Lawson's name that much. And so his attorneys are kind of still sitting back. So I don't see a reason yet why either set of lawyers would tell their client, hey, you really got to get on the stand and testify. And I just don't see either one testifying at this point.
But right now, how would you determine the Brooks Houck statement? Since it took him an hour and a half to write 8 pages back then on that day. I think it was the 7th of July during the interrogation by the attorney, lead detective, John Snow. But then they come along and poke holes in everything, blow up really everything he said by showing the cell phone records, contradicting everything he wrote down on paper. So right now, going into possible verdict day, isn't that a disaster for Brooks Houck?
Like I said, I think they have a plan. I think they have a plan to explain things. And certainly some of the testimony was, especially by Snow, regarding the statement of Houck and how he framed it. You know, the prosecution had a way they framed it, and it's like, well, and then the defense would come back and say, well, actually, that's not exactly what it says. You know, you guys are kind of framing it in a different light than what it really reads. And so I anticipate the defense there going to call some witnesses and put on a defense to fill in those gaps and try to cover themselves as much as they can.
All right, WHAS 11 News legal analyst Nick Mudd here, Louisville attorney of the Mudd Law Group. Thank you very much. That wraps up our 30-minute broadcast for you here on this Monday as we are beginning week 2. The trial resumes tomorrow morning in Bowling Green, Kentucky, Central Time. On Tuesday, we'll of course have coverage throughout the day on our WHAS 11 TV newscasts, and then we'll be back here right here tomorrow night at 9 p.m. A deep dive on the day's proceedings in the Crystal Rogers murder case. It's right here on WHAS 11 Plus. Thank you very much for watching.